Shelby This Week has been following the primary election, and now we have the tallies for you. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a significant increase in absentee voting this year. So let's take a look at what those voters decided. In the race for Macomb County Prosecuting Attorney, Democratic candidate Mary Stronowski won 34.6% of the votes, with Democratic candidate Jody Switowski right behind her with 32.3% of the votes. In the race for Macomb County Prosecuting Attorney, Republican candidate Peter J. Lucido won 68.3% of the votes, with Republican candidate Richard John Goodman behind him with 31.7% of the votes. With Macomb County Sheriff Republican candidate Terrence H. Mikowski winning 60.2% of the votes, Republican Michael R. Raffo was behind him with 39.8% of the votes. In the race for Macomb County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Republican candidate Anthony G. Ferlini won 44.8% of the votes, with Republican candidate Julie A. Williams behind him with 23.3% of the votes. In the race for Macomb County Treasurer, Republican candidate Larry Roca won 48.4% of the votes, with Republican candidate Sherry Murphy behind him with 28.6% of the votes. In the race for County Commissioner of the 6th District, in which James L. Carabelli previously held this position, Republican candidate Jeff Farrington won 52% of the votes, with Republican candidate Victoria Goyke behind him with 48% of the votes. For Shelby Township, in the race for Shelby Township Supervisor, Republican candidate Rick Stathakis won with 67.1% of the votes, with Republican candidate Grant Galassa behind him with 32.9% of the votes. We spoke with re-elected Shelby Township Supervisor Rick Stathakis about his re-election.
Well, first of all, I'm very humbled, and I really appreciate them giving me another chance to serve them, and I'm looking forward to maintaining or actually making sure that we attain our objectives and more importantly meet their expectations and hopefully even surpass that. So that's what we're going to be working toward. And what does that mean? Well, we haven't raised the tax rate in 12 years, and we're not going to raise the tax rate. And we're not going to borrow. We're always going to pay cash. We're not going to bond, and we're not going to cut services. And a lot of people say, well, how can that be done? Well, it can be done by simply adding and subtracting. It's that simple. And we make sure that what we do, what we pay for, we make sure we have to have. And we're going to continue doing that. Stan Grote, our clerk, he ran a spectacular election. I mean, I was there coming in and out, and with this COVID-19 stuff, it was really hard to maneuver, but they got it done. And Shelby Township did another wonderful job with the election. So I'm very happy for Shelby Township in that way.
In the race for Shelby Township Treasurer, Republican candidate James L. Carabelli won 54.4% of the votes, with incumbent Republican candidate Michael Flynn behind him with 45.6% of the votes. And in the race for Shelby Township Trustees, Republican candidate Vince Viviano won 17.1% of the votes, Republican candidate Lisa Casali won 16.7% of the votes, Republican candidate John Vermeulen won 13.5% of the votes, and Republican candidate Lucia DeSico won 13% of the votes. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next edition of Shelby This Week.